Hello and hello and welcome to this Nystra session, Making Programs That Make Differences, Evaluating Your Outcomes to Improve Service. So hello, my name is Jackie Dyke and I am currently an assistant professor at SUNY Cortland. But before I moved into this role, my job was actually to design programs. And I was really lucky to get to work for an agency that gave me a lot of creative freedom when it came to creating programs. Um, Part of designing programs is figuring out the big why. What's the purpose of the program? What are the program goals? And how do we know we've achieved those program goals? How do we know that the program has the outcomes that we hope it has? That's what we're going to talk about today in this session. So I'm here as part of Nystra because I really like giving presentations. I think it's super fun, but I love tracking program outcomes. If you have any questions after the session, I want to let you know, please feel free to email me. You can reach me at jacqueline.dyke@cortland.edu, and I'm going to give my email address again at the end of this presentation. So this is the learning objectives for the session. So first, I hope that by the end of the session, you're going to be able to identify a minimum of 2 different ways to capture data for program metrics. We're going to review that during the presentation. The second objective is to identify a practical method for you to compile your data. So how can you actually put this information together that you're gathering? And then the third thing is I want you to be able to identify a minimum of 2 ways to use this data to advocate for therapeutic recreation services. And that's going to include at your program level, at your agency level, and beyond as we advocate for TR across the world. So before we really dive in to those objectives and achieving those learning objectives, I kind of want to stop for a second and just talk about why do outcomes actually matter? Do outcomes actually matter? And in my world, the really fun thing about program metrics and outcomes um, is that when we look at them, they give us a lot of information and they tell us if we should stay the course and keep doing the same things that we've been doing, or if we need to implement change. And that change could be dramatic, that change could be small, it could be little tweaks to um, to our programming, it could be implementing whole new things. But they tell us if what we're doing is working. Our outcomes also tell us about what our participants want and what our participants need. Um, we are all complete people and our participants are complete people and they have wants and they have needs, and our outcomes show us if we are meeting and lining up with those wants and those needs. Are we helping folks to meet their dreams, to fulfill their dreams? Are we helping folks to overcome obstacles? Um, they really let us know what we're doing and how well we are doing it. And then last, outcomes give us a foundation for advocacy. A lot of times I think that when we are practicing TR, to an extent, we really think of it as an art, and really it is an art. Um, but sometimes I think that we forget that we can still quantify outcomes even in such a creative thing that we do. And having outcomes that demonstrate that we are creating change and demonstrate that we are helping our participants, helping meet our participants' wants and needs, that gives us a foundation to be able to advocate for our patients, for our profession, um, to our employers, to the government, to insurance companies. They give us that foundational bit of information to stand on. So Before we ever can start collecting data, analyzing data, coming up with trends, before we get to do any of the fun things with numbers, um, we have to select what it is that we want to know. So what do we want to know? Um, well, the first question to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of the agency that you work for? Okay, so stop and think to yourself, do you actually know off the top of your head your agency's mission and vision? And if you don't, throw me on pause for a second and do a quick search and find out, what is it? What is the purpose of your agency? And then from there, what is the purpose of your therapeutic recreation department? Hopefully, and the way it quote unquote should be, is that your therapeutic recreation department's purpose or mission statement would nest inside of that purpose and mission statement of your agency. It's going to reflect why your agency exists. It's not going to be independent from why your entire agency exists. Um, in terms of your therapeutic recreation department, maybe it's just you. Maybe you are a department of one. That is not at all uncommon, and that's totally fine in terms of program metrics. But have you taken the time to write down the mission and the vision of the program itself? Having a mission and vision for your therapeutic recreation department and for your agency, that information is the basis for everything that you decide to measure. It's the lens that you're going to be using to view your program. So this is the very first step. It's the big question. Why are we here? All right. The next thing we have to think about before we start tracking program metrics, before we figure out what we're measuring, we have to talk for a minute about what program measures, what program metrics actually are. So agencies of all sizes, little agencies, huge agencies, every single agency there is, not even just healthcare, um, anyone who is doing well because they have metrics that they use to track outcomes. A lot of things that you'll see in program metrics are actually financial metrics. And as much as we hate to think about it, healthcare is a business, and you have to you have to have at least as much income as you spend, or you quickly will not be providing any services at all. So these are, program metrics are, they're standard measures for monitoring and evaluating the ongoing programs that you offer. So you do not use program metrics to track your special events. These are for your ongoing things that continue month to month at your agency. Now, on an agency level, this is going to include things like utilization, opportunity costs, customer or patient satisfaction, budget variance, efficiency, things like that. And I'm going to define those for you briefly. So utilization, when you're working in a bedded program, which is where many of us work, so a place where people spend the night, it's the percentage of beds that are filled every night. So just to keep things simple, I'm saying, like, pretend you work at a facility that has 100 beds. Um, so if your facility has 100 beds and there are 30 days in a month, then there are 3,000 potential times that somebody could sleep there within 1 month. Okay? And let's say you had 87 people who stayed there for 26 nights each. And I just made those numbers up completely. They are not based on any average lengths of stay. This is purely a math example for you, not a healthcare example. But if you had 87 people stay there for 26 nights each, then the program would have used 2,262 of those potential nights. That utilization is 75.4%. Opportunity cost is how much money your program could have had it had 100% utilization for the month. So your opportunity cost, that in that last example I just gave you, the agency had a utilization of 75.4%. Your opportunity cost is how much more funds your agency would have pulled in if you had used the other 24.6% of beds available. Now, 100% utilization over the course of a month it does not generally happen. Perfection is not an obtainable goal. So generally, an agency will set a standard that they want to see for utilization, and oftentimes that's 90%. So even though if you set a utilization goal that's less than 100%, your opportunity cost is still how much money you would have had in income had you reached that 100% utilization goal for the month. Next, we've got customer or patient satisfaction. So that is not generally one question that you're tracking. It's generally several questions. It's generally a questionnaire. If you have had a hospital stay, if your loved one has had a hospital stay recently, you know that afterwards you frequently get home a mailed questionnaire about your satisfaction. And it's oftentimes several pages long. But that questionnaire goes towards customer and patient satisfaction. And it gives a full description of what the patient or your loved one actually experienced while they were in your agency's care. And why does that matter? Well, people tell people where to go. If I have a loved one who's going to need care for something, I'm going to ask what other people's experiences were. And if people did not have great experiences, they're probably not going to recommend folks seek out the same facility as they or their loved one went to. We also have budget variance. So every agency creates an annual budget. And it's usually broken down just by 12 into a monthly budget, and you track it your finance department will track it over the course of a year. Your variance is what your projected budget was versus what actually happened. Okay, so it's what you thought you'd spend versus what you actually spent, and what you thought you'd bring in for income versus what you actually brought in for income. And sometimes things can break really well, and you're like, wow, I pulled in way more funds than I thought I would this month. Or they can go not so well. Like if your agency has a very low utilization, there's less reimbursement for insurance and there's less money to spend out. One thing about budget variance that affects all of us who offer TR services is that there is somewhere in your agency funds set aside for your program to exist, funds set aside to staff your program. And if these are things that you have any say over or any control over, you want to make sure that you have a way of following what's happening. Oftentimes, when it comes to TR and other services, if you don't spend the money that you're allocated, you will not have it in the next budget year. So you always want to make sure that you are on track throughout the year to spend down the funds that are allocated to you. You never want to leave it out right for the end. Your finance department will see that you did that. So make sure you're consistently spending money on your program supplies, materials. Make sure that you are using the funds that you have to staff your program, and consistently use that throughout the year. That demonstrates that you're able to handle the things that you've been given, but it also just really shows that those services are needed. It's a solid marker that the funds allocated towards the service were needed. All right. I want to say really quick too that I am recording this in my home, and my dog's arch nemesis is the mailman or the UPS truck or the FedEx driver or the cat that lives next door. So if that does pick up at all in this recording, I do apologize. So moving from those large program metrics, let's think about what are the kinds of things that we could use in a TR program. What would we actually want to track in our ongoing programs? Well, every program is unique and is going to have unique expected outcomes, but we will have some commonalities across all TR programs. So these are four that I pulled that I think would be appropriate for any therapeutic recreation program to dive in as a starting point for tracking program metrics. The first one is satisfaction. We have all heard this said a million times that we are the quality of life profession. So if we are truly the quality of life profession, then we want to see that people have some satisfaction with our programs. And we want to be able to tell through customer satisfaction, through patient satisfaction, that we are building and improving quality of life. That makes sense, right? So we really want to track satisfaction with services, and we don't want that to be only one question that we ask. We really want to dig in and ask several questions about satisfaction. The next thing is how much does it cost to offer your programs per participant? So you have got a suite of services that you offer. How much do each of those services cost per person involved in them? After that, you've got what's your projected annual cost for everything that you're offering? And then you should also know, if you could offer anything, what would its projected annual cost be? So your nice grounded actual projected annual cost, and then if you could fight for more funding, what would you offer with those funds and what would they cost? We should know those things. And then back to that projected annual cost, how much did you vary from that annual projected cost? Did you spend less than you thought you would? Did you have to ask for more funds? Did you run out of money with a month or two left in your fiscal year? So our fiscal years often don't run January through December, but let's just pretend they do for illustration's sake. So did you start offering services in January and you got brand new art supplies and you're doing great, and then you realized come September that maybe your supplies were running low and you weren't sure how to do things, and so you had to change your programming because you didn't have adequate supplies? Or did you continue to offer the program without adequate supplies? Did you see a change in satisfaction when you had adequate supplies versus when you started to run out of adequate supplies and or had to change your programming? Um, did you actually run out of supplies at some point in November and have to seek supplies from somewhere else? Or did you have to completely change programming due to lack of supplies? What is actually happening? So if you are tracking these numbers all along, you can learn that information. You can figure that information out. And that improved planning can yield improved outcomes. And I think we've heard this a lot. Remember, therapeutic recreation is input, the TR process, and then output. So we're going to have outcomes based on that process that we've implemented. So we want to make sure that we're offering that quality across the year. TR program metrics are going to help us do that. We are all at different places on the road to implementing program metrics. So you may be in a place where you're like, yeah, I've been tracking outcomes and patient satisfaction. I have been drilling down to the program level and tracking individual programs to see satisfaction and outcomes there. And you might be at the point where you're like, how do I compile this? Who do I share it with? You may be at a point where you're not even sure what data collection is. Maybe this whole idea is really overwhelming. Maybe you've thought about pausing or stopping viewing this because, wow, this sounds like math and that's scary. Maybe you're at the very starting stage, but wherever you are, you right now are already on this road to implementing program metrics just by being in this presentation. So the first thing, the most important thing that you can do before moving forward with implementing program metrics is figuring out what is the purpose of the agency you work for, the overall agency goal. What is the overall agency's expected outcomes? The more that you know about that, and the more that you know the whys about that, the easier it will be for you to track your own metrics and your own outcomes, and to then at the end of all of this to loop back and demonstrate how vital your programming is for the agency to achieve its desired outcomes. So the first step on this roadmap is, what is the purpose of the agency that you work for? Why does it exist? Who does it serve? What does it help folks to achieve? What needs does it meet in the community? Look at that. And sometimes we get so hung up on the day-to-day that we kind of forget the why. Like, why does this even exist? Why are we here? Once you know that, the second stop on our little roadmap is, what is the purpose of your TR department? And I mentioned this before, but it should be nested inside the purpose of the agency. So let's say the purpose of your agency is to improve quality of life for people with serious mental illness. Then the purpose of your TR department should also address quality of life for people with serious mental illness. It may just be a little bit more narrow. So it will use recreation and leisure to improve quality of life for folks with serious mental illness. So it's going to be somehow reflecting the agency's goals. It's going to, like I said, it's going to be nested. Think of it like those nesting dolls. Like, your purpose should fit right inside the purpose of your whole agency. You wouldn't want something completely conflicting, like teaching about an entirely different topic. Okay. Now that you know the purpose of your TR department, and realistically speaking too, it might take you a little while to figure out your TR department. You're going to need to brainstorm, revise, think it through, make sure it's something that feels good, that you can live in, make it feel like home. And then you're going to move on. What outcomes would demonstrate the success of your department? What information would support that? What would show that you're achieving that? Those are the outcomes that you need to demonstrate your program success. So when you know the why of your program, that's when you figure out, how do I measure if this works? And we kind of work backwards from there. Our next step is, once you know what outcomes would show that, figure out how to quantify those outcomes. So in other words, what questions would I ask to measure that? What would I look at to measure that? What would be relevant to this? How would I show that I've reached that outcome? So I figured out the purpose of my TR department. I figure out what outcomes I would want to see, and now I'm going to think to myself, like I said, how am I going to quantify that? How will I actually measure that outcome? Afterwards, the next step is to identify how to collect data about those outcomes. How I know now what question am I asking, but how am I going to go about actually asking those questions? Now, you've probably done, way back in your bachelor's degree, at some point, you've done some study on asking questions, on program evaluation. So it might have been a long time ago, and that's okay, but we're digging back to that knowledge. And then once we have figured out how to collect data about those outcomes, we continuously collect data. You never stop collecting data when it comes to program metrics. So this is not just a brief program evaluation where you're doing a snapshot in time. This is continuous collection of data that you will compile every single month, and you will compare month-to-month trends and then annual trends as you do this for longer and longer. So this is kind of a never-ending process, but it's how you continuously improve your quality. So if you've gotten to this slide and you start having questions, I would really encourage you right now to pull out a sheet of paper, pull out a pen or a pencil, and start jotting some ideas down. I think that would be super helpful for you right now. And this is going to actually stay the screen. And I'm going to give you guys about 30-40 seconds to really think about, what is the purpose of your TR department. So 30 seconds from now. All right, so that's roughly 30 seconds. So work through all of these steps. Remember to remind yourself that this is going to be the ongoing way that you will measure your programs, so you want to make sure that you've got solid footing before you begin. The other thing, just before moving forward, that I do want to say and acknowledge is that you are so busy. Um, direct care CTRSs right now are my heroes in this state. You know, we've been recognized as essential employees, which is so exciting. Um, and you have been working so hard. So if you are thinking to yourself, this is great, but I don't have the time for this, I feel you, I understand you, that demonstrates your reality. One thing I do want to encourage you to do is, like, you do not have to create this entire thing in one sit down. These are things that you can briefly brainstorm and work towards, and you don't have to start collecting data on every metric all at once. This can be a slow process that you roll out. It's going to be a process that you keep in place continuously from once you implement it. So it is okay to do this in small phases, all right? We also get to be realistic with our goal setting. So I mentioned those 2 slides ago. I mentioned those program metrics that are really relevant for therapeutic recreation, and I wanted to dive into them a little bit more and how we could track them. So much of this will have to do with your agency, your length of stay, the population who you're working with, um, but like I said, commonalities first. So satisfaction with the services that are received. It's a big deal. If people are not satisfied, then we want to change what we do, right? The next thing is the cost per person to receive services, and then the projected annual cost and variance. So going back to satisfaction, you never just want to ask, are you satisfied, yes or no? Because that doesn't really drill in and give more information on areas for improvement. So you want to really break it down. Now, one way that you can break it down is to think about the different things that people could or could not be satisfied with. So just off the top of my head, I can think of things like I was satisfied with the physical environment. I was or I wasn't. Level of satisfaction with the supplies used, level of satisfaction with the facilitator, level of satisfaction with the I think I said space already. Satisfaction with the way you discussed the things that were discussed, like with the debriefing of groups. You can decide on things that are appropriate for where you are, but I would definitely keep in information about the physical environment versus information about the intervention versus information about the facilitator. Because if people are saying they are not satisfied with your services, and they're really not satisfied with how cold the room is that you use, then that's really going to bring down your scores. So make sure to tease that out as its own item. And then people will be more likely to not think about physical environment when they think about your approach or the actual things that you're doing. So you're going to want to ask several questions about satisfaction. The next thing is cost. How much does it cost for an individual to be part of the programs that you offer? So you're going to break this down by each program that you offer. So we don't just offer therapeutic recreation. If you saw me right now, I'd be making that in quotation marks. We offer a suite of services, right? And you might offer a leisure education service. You might offer something to improve a program on fine motor skills. You might offer yoga for balance. You might offer a mindfulness group, but you have a suite of services offered, and you want to figure out, this is going to take you some math. You're going to want to figure out how much do each of those separate pieces, each of those separate programs cost to offer per participant. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that math. I'm going to give you some easy steps to figure it out. And then what's the overall projected annual cost of you offering everything all together? So you're going to break down the total cost for each one of those programs and then the total cost for everything you're doing. And then along with that, we'll go, how much are you varying from your plan? So these are solid things to start with. There might be other things that you've already thought of. Maybe you're already thinking about other awesome program metrics that you want to track, and I am excited for you if you're thinking that way, and I want you to tell me, send me that email, jacqueline.dyke@cortland.edu, and let me know what program metrics are you thinking about tracking. Um, so yeah, dive in. I think that if you are thinking to yourself, I gotta just start with one, then I think satisfaction is going to be um, the simplest one to begin with. All right, so back in the first objective for this training, I said you'd be able to identify at least two ways of collecting data. So information from our participants or our patients is one way, but information from EHR, finance, or other agency records that's three other ways. So hopefully you'll walk away with this with at least remembering two of them. So this is a lot of information and this is a lot to learn. So here we go. When it comes to information from participants and patients, really, a survey is going to be the simplest way you can go about this. Now, depending on your type of facility and how long folks are with you, the frequency of this survey can change. So if you work with someone for like a week or so, then you're probably going to survey them just the one time. If you work with somebody and they're living in your residential program for 6 months to a year, then you're probably going to want to survey them more frequently than that. Okay, so the first thing when it comes to survey, here are 5 different ways that you can rate satisfaction. So the first thing is actual patient satisfaction, and you'll see I have scaled there, and that means that you should be providing a scaled score. So like a Likert scale, like the 1 strongly disagree, 2 disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. Or you could do a scale of 1 to 10, but whatever it is that you choose to do with that scale, a scaled score of satisfaction. Next, family satisfaction. So depending again on the population you're working with, it might not be only the patient whose score you might need to know. It might need to be caregivers, the family, direct family members, people who live in the home with the patient. How does that family as a whole feel about the care that's provided? So what's going on at the whole family level? Next thing is the patient perception of care. So I feel like, this is again scaled, I received high quality care in the TR department. So it's not just that they're satisfied, but they perceive high quality of care. I might be satisfied because I love the facilitator. I might have had so much fun in TR groups. I might have gotten super involved. I might have built a little community around myself. I could have loved the experience. But if you ask me if I received high quality care, I might say no still. I might say, well, no, I didn't really get anything out of it. I loved being there. I loved the facilitator, but I can't say that anything's changed in my life. So that's a really important question that's worded differently that will show you what's going on. And that could be something as simple as folks don't know why they're receiving your services. Folks don't know the mission or vision of the therapeutic recreation department that you're a part of and what they can expect as an outcome of your care. And maybe it's something as simple as we need to strengthen our debriefing skills so that every session folks walk away realizing why they were in that room, just to even begin with. Okay, the next question would be the patient rating of value of service. And so that means the cost that they spent to participate in your services, they meshed. So if they say that they received high value services for cost, then that's a good thing. So you might think to yourself, oh, well, nobody here pays out of pocket. You're still asking that question because people still are either having their commercial insurance pay and then they have out of pocket co-pays or co-insurance, or they might have, Medicaid and Medicare and they might pay nothing, but they might still be very aware that their insurance is paying for something. So still ask that question regardless of that. And then last though, and this is something that we often overlook, but is super relevant, is what is their reported incidence of symptoms when so if if you're working with somebody monthly, um, ask, what's their incidence of symptoms? And this could be like, um, just ask them on a scaled score again, um, how often they're experiencing symptoms, and then track that. And you might see that folks who are rating your services highly might also be reporting fewer symptoms of what they have going on. And that's an exciting outcome to be able to point towards. Now, beyond getting information from participants or patients, you can also just get information from EHR, finance, and other records. So you can find out from individuals' EHR whether or not the individual obtains their individual goals and objectives, or what percentage of individual goals and objectives have been achieved. So you could potentially find out the folks who felt that they received high value services, high quality services, were they more likely to obtain their goals and objectives than folks who did not rate it highly? That would be a really interesting thing to look at. You can look at in EHR or other records, frequency of participation in interventions. So did the folks who participated in interventions rate higher satisfaction, and did they also have better outcomes overall from the whole program? You can also see quality of participation in interventions. So you might think somebody doesn't really participate in your TR programming, but when you look at their level of participation in other programming, you might be surprised and learn that they're actually participating way more in your programs than in anything else. And that would be very helpful information. You can also see from financial records the cost per patient per intervention of what you're doing. Now, let me just zoom out for a second. That is so much information. This information that I just went over on this one slide, that is so much to learn. And I would not expect you to suddenly implement a program metrics to establish program metrics to suddenly track all of these things. That would not be a realistic expectation, so please do not think that that's what I'm asking you to do. I would be asking you to pick one and slowly over time build. The other thing is, once you do get to this level of information, this is so much information and you could learn so much. One thing that can always be hard to learn when you look at answers to these questions is why. Why are things happening the way they are? Why do why do your patients feel satisfied or not satisfied? What is causing the quality of participation in interventions? That's something you don't know the answer to when you just start this off. Your answers of why things are happening the way they are, that's something that will emerge with time. So like I said before, this is not a snapshot program evaluation. This is a continuous program evaluation. And the answer to that question of why will emerge with time. All right, a quick, I guess I'll call it a word of caution, but a few things to consider as you start tracking program metrics. The first thing is, where are you saving your data? Like, where are you actually saving it? Are you using it Microsoft Excel? Are you using the Google equivalent? But where are you saving it? What are you doing with it? Is it on a flash drive? Is it on the hard drive or the computer that you're working with? Where is it? The second thing to think about is any protected health information. So you do not want to violate HIPAA, that is bad. You do not want to violate CFR 42 Part 2, that is bad. You want to make sure that there is no patient identifying information on anything you're pulling for the purposes of program metrics. So you have to, if you pull anything that has protected health information, you have to de-identify that. So you have to remove anything that would show who it actually was about. and you really need to make sure that you're backing up your data. This one time, I had a flash drive that had a lot of really important files on it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I have not really backed this flash drive up. So I'm going to back this flash drive onto a second flash drive. And that's what I did. So I put my computer at the time, this is at work. It was work information being on a work computer. And I popped the flash drive, the first flash drive that had all the information right into the computer, and the second flash drive right below it. And the way this computer was, it was a tower PC, and these two USB ports were right on the front of the tower. And there's a significant amount of information there. And so I walked away from my computer, and when I walked away, while things were just, copying over, um, somebody from the IT department came and said, "Hey, I'm here to install your new monitor." And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'll be in there in just a moment." And they said, "Can I get started?" And I said, "Sure." And they walked into my office, and I walked in maybe a minute later, and I realized that my PC tower was face down on the ground. And I said, "Oh, did you take those flash drives out?" And the IT person said, "What flash drives?" And he flipped the computer back up, and both of my flash drives had literally snapped in half. And so I lost all of that data. So please make sure that you back your data up. I think that a lot of us think, hey, it's backed up, we're safe, we're good. And then until it happens to us and we lose it, we don't realize how important this is. So back it up. Okay, so let's say now that you have implemented that patient satisfaction survey that you do maybe a week before somebody um, finishes your program, goes home, or goes to a different facility, and you asked all sorts of questions related to patient satisfaction, and it was anonymous, so folks could answer honestly. Let's say you had that done on, a pen and paper, and now you've got a stack of paper. Like, what do you do with that stack of paper? That's what we're talking about now. So now it's time to compile that data. You got this data. What do you do with it? So I am hopeful that my belief is true, that there are two types of people in this world, those who love Excel and those who don't know it yet. But here's how you would compile data in Excel. Excel can be scary, but once you learn it, it is an awesome tool. So this is an entirely fictional data set, just made up for presentations. But let's say I had 15 people who I surveyed in the month of April. Okay, so on the top of every survey, there's going to be a number. So I can always go back and find that survey. And so 1 through 15 is going to be just handwritten at the top of the survey. And here are the answers. So let's say I just start off with a 3-question survey, and I'm titling the questions for tracking in Excel these things. So patient satisfaction. So I might have said like, I was satisfied with the care I received from the therapeutic recreation department, and then gave them the scale of 1 to 5. So we got a variety here. We do got a 1, we got a 2, we got a 3, another 2, we got a couple 5s, we got a smattering of scores, which is what would happen likely in real life. And then we also ask patients in this entirely fake scenario to rate the value of the care they received. I believe the care I received was of high value, and we got a smattering of scores. And then my next question is, did you experience a decline in symptoms over either the course of your stay or the month, depending on where you're working? And the answer is just yes or no. Did your symptoms improve? Okay, so here is raw data. I got yeses, I got nos, I got rating of value, I got patient satisfaction, and I've numbered every survey. So here's what it looks like raw. That's it. At this point, all you've done is just type into Excel. All right, so you've got that raw data. You numbered all of the surveys, so you could always go back and find a survey if you had to, and you put all the raw data into Excel. The data has been compiled. Now, you could use any spreadsheet programming tool that you wanted. You could use the Google equivalent of Excel. You're not bound to Excel in any way. I like Excel and I prefer Excel, and it's where I do my work.
but just because I'm giving you the examples from Excel does not mean that Excel has to be your go-to in terms of spreadsheets and tracking what you do. I just wanted to make sure that I made that clear. So now it's time to get analytical. You've compiled your raw data. It's nice and clean. You made it into this beautiful program. You're ready to figure out and dive in and find out what's really going on here. So let's get analytical. All right, so that data was compiled, and now let's look at how I could analyze it. So this is still an Excel screenshot. That information that I just showed you, those 15 surveys, is the portion on the left where it's titled raw data at the top. The only thing I've done is make outlines around the boxes. Nothing there has changed. To the right, I've used Excel to figure out what other information I can pull other than just raw data. So that's my metrics data. Okay, so when I look at this, I found, first of all, the average of my patient satisfaction score, and I averaged a 4. Okay, and then the average of when it came to patient rating of value was a 3.86667. All right. Then the other side of things is the decline in symptoms question. I had 11 people total say yes, they experienced declines in symptoms. And I had 4 people total say no, no decline in symptoms. And I look at what percent that is. So 11 out of 15 is 73.33333333%. All right. Then I can look at this. The number of patients who scored my program at a 3 or higher who also had a decline in symptoms. In terms of patient satisfaction, 10. I had 10 people who scored me a 3 or higher and declined in symptoms, and 9 people who rated my value as a 3 or higher who experienced a decline in symptoms. And then I can also look at patient satisfaction when it comes to a percent. So what is the percentage of patients who scored a 3 or higher with a decline in symptoms? So 66.66% who were satisfied experienced declines in symptoms, and 60% who rated my value as a 3 or higher also experienced declines in symptoms. That's just some really interesting information. What does it mean? What do I do with it? Well, nothing. This is my baseline. This is the first month I've collected data. At this point, there's nothing I can do. When it comes to program metrics, it's a month-to-month comparison that looks at overall trends over time. So am I satisfied with these scores? Honestly, I'm not sure. What should my scores be? Ideally, better scores are better, but maybe if I had tracked data the month before, this would be a significant increase. Excuse me. So we don't really know what to do just from this one example. It's when I start tracking over time that I really get the chance to figure out what could be changed, if anything, or what could be added to improve my services. So every month I'm going to do this. And so obviously I'm not going to have exactly 15 surveys every month. So the raw data will never be compared to raw data. Raw to raw, I'm not going to compare that. But I'm going to track over time my metrics data. And as I add more things to my program metrics that I want to track, I'll have more things that I can learn. Okay, so here is a second chunk of raw data getting analyzed, just to give you a quick second example. So the top portion of raw data and metrics data is the same. But this bottom portion is what is different. So I've got my number of patients, the number of goals they had, the number of goals they've met, and the percentage of goals met. So this is not information I asked on a survey now. This is information that I obtained through their records. Okay, so now I can look at, there's 12 patients I was able to pull this information from. I can see the number of patients who achieved 75% or more of their goals was 11. And the percentage of patients who achieved 75% or more of their goals was 91.666667.
Okay, so my satisfaction's a 4. We got decline in symptoms, but when I really drill down and look at, I don't want to say performance. It sounds so analytical. It sounds kind of cold, but when I want to look at what actual outcomes the individual experienced, I know that rounding up, that 92% of my patients who participated in my programs achieved greater than 75% of their overall treatment goals. That's a really great thing to see. If you were to pull a number like that as a working direct care staff, you should be incredibly excited about what you're doing, because meeting goals is how we measure success. So yes, this example is fake, but yes, it's a great example. All right, I also had mentioned how much your programs cost per participant. But before I dive into your cost per participant, your overall program cost is actually not really something that you're going to have to do much calculation to find out. Your overall cost of providing care, you can likely find out from either speaking with your supervisor or speaking to your finance department. And this really depends on where you work and how much um, direct impact you have on spending. But you should look at how much you spent for the year and where you spent the funds for those supplies. Okay, so total up the supplies you used for an intervention and how much those supplies cost. You might have to do some digging, but this is not anything more than some like basic math with like basic math. You might not even need a calculator to do this kind of thing. You can kind of round. Um, but some basic math to total up how much money you spent on the different interventions that you do. Once you know how much you spent overall, you're going to break it down to cost per participant. So you should know like how much did it cost to operate your yoga program total for the year? How much did it cost to operate your leisure education program total for the year? How much did it cost to operate I'm trying to remember all of the same programs I mentioned, to operate your fine motor skills improvement group for the year? How much did it cost to operate your community reintegration? I don't think I used that example before, but figure out the total cost how much did it actually cost you as a TR department to offer each one of those interventions total. And then you want to figure out how many attendees you had in each of those. Okay. Um, and each time someone attends counts as one. So you figured out total cost, let's say like drilling on yoga. You figured out the total cost of offering yoga, and then you're going to total number of attendees, not the total number of unique attendees, the total number attended. So if one person goes 25 times, that counts as 25 units of attendance. Okay, so you're going to do the math, figure out how much was that intervention versus the number of attendees, not unique attendees. Do that math. And then for cost per participant, you're going to sum all of the different interventions attended by each person. So maybe somebody did, mindfulness. That was the other example I had given. Maybe they attended mindfulness 10 times, yoga 15 times, leisure education 10 times, and they did 2 community reintegration trips. So you're going to count up, add up all those costs. So you'll need 20 times in, I think I said leisure education, or mindfulness. How much does 20 mindfulness sessions cost? How much does 25 yoga sessions cost? How much did 15 leisure education sessions cost? How many did 2 community reintegration trips cost? Add all that together, and that is your total cost for that individual to receive care. Cost per participant. There's been several points in this presentation that I said, so why? Why are we doing this? You know, what is the point of this? Why are we doing it all? And the why always goes back to, your agency's mission and vision and your
your TR department's mission and vision. So that big why do we offer the care that we offer? Well, we do it for a reason. We do it to see outcomes and to create change in the lives of the people who we work with. So when we get in the nitty-gritty of the data, when we learn how to fall in love with Excel, we have the opportunity then to see if what we're doing actually lines up with what we think we're doing. We get the chance to see people are satisfied, they have a high value, and they're meeting their goals, right? But maybe they're satisfied and they have a high value for service and they're not meeting the goals of the program. Something's out of alignment then, and we have the opportunity to stop and look at what we're doing and figure out like what tweak could I make next month, and then I can compare. But I never stop taking in new information. I never stop compiling the data. And I track this month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, and it continuously improves my quality and it continuously informs me as to why I should make the decisions I'm making in terms of my programs, improving my programs, and improving, most importantly, those patient outcomes. So the point of all of this is to help us achieve our program goals, to help the individual achieve their individual goals, and to really give us purpose as a workforce. So now once I've got all of this information, there is more that I can do. So I can improve myself and my own program. And if all you ever do with your program metrics is improve your own program, that is okay. But I want to let you know that that is not where you have to stop. That is not all you have to do. There are so many more things that you can do with your program metrics, and we're going to dive into that now. So before I dive into what else you can do with it, here is how you would use your program metrics to improve your services. So this is if you kept your metrics entirely internal. So the first thing you do is you're going to collect that data. You're going to analyze. I skipped compile, but compile and then analyze that data. And you're going to use that data to evaluate the program that you're currently offering. You're going to identify areas that you could improve and which would hopefully improve the outcomes of the data you collected. So you're going to identify areas for improvement and you're going to implement some new program strategies. Is that new programming? Is that entirely new, excuse me, is that entirely new services offered? Is it changing the length of your groups? Is it changing the number of people in your groups? Is it changing the referral criteria? Whatever it is, identify what you could change. And then you're going to implement new strategies. And I encourage you to not implement a lot of change all at once. If you implement 10 changes, it's going to be very challenging to tease out which of those 10 changes were the cause for improvement or the cause for things getting worse. So this is slow change, small changes that will produce measurable effects. So we're looking at long-term trends, not fast change when we do program metrics. So I'm going to implement a couple new strategies, maybe only one new strategy, and I'm still continuously collecting data. Okay, so as I continuously collect data, every month I'm making this end of month report. So right now it's May. So I would be currently collecting data. I would have started on May 1st for the month of May. I'll collect until May 31st. I'll keep collecting that data. And I'm still collecting data on June 1st, but that would go towards a June report. So every month I'm looking at as a whole. Okay, so you've collected program metrics for at least 6 months at this point when we're starting to think about what else can I do with this information. You got at least 6 months of data. Even better would be like a year. You're getting better and better at this. It doesn't take you a long time to compile or analyze. You pop it right into a report, you show your outcomes, you figure out, you know, what's going on. It's all been compiled. You make little changes, it improves again. Now, you've got some solid information going back, like I said, at least 6 months, preferably a full year. you might start to get excited. Like, hey, look at this awesome stuff that our program is doing. It's really, maybe we're really achieving things we didn't even realize we were achieving. And maybe we weren't in a great place when we started, but look at these improvements that we've implemented and how much we've grown and changed and how much better outcomes are. So what do you do now? Well, when it comes to program metrics, this is giving you firm footing to advocate for your services. And it's going to give you firm footing to increase your funding, increase your staffing, increase your billable rates, advocate for inclusion in annual agency reports, and get TR's name out there. So let's look at this cycle. It's a little different. You're still collecting and analyzing data. You'll never stop collecting and analyzing data with program metrics. You're tracking data over time. So that's like I said, at least 6 months, better to have a year. But then you're going to create a report and you're going to put in pretty graphs that you can make in Excel. And if at any point you want help with Excel, there are some amazing, amazing things on YouTube that you can use and find. But also you can, reach out to me, say, hey, how do I make this report? I'll help you through it the first time. But you're going to create a report showing that what you've done, all right, what metrics that you have, and then you're going to share those outcomes. You've moved from just internal continuous quality improvement to really external key stakeholders. So remember, this should all be de-identified. Back when you collected data and it was raw data, it was de-identified and there was no protected health information. You can share your outcomes with key stakeholders. So that might be your direct supervisor. That might be your your agency's higher level administrative staff. That might be it might be the government. It might be insurance companies, but you might be able to start sharing this information further and further on. This is an exciting place to be. When we talk to key stakeholders and the only things we can talk about are subjective, like our emotions, our impressions, it can be really hard for them to buy in. But when we've quantified our outcomes and we can say, hey, here is this beautiful report I made demonstrating the outcomes that we achieve through therapeutic recreation, when you hand that off to somebody, eyes light up, people get interested because healthcare is outcomes driven. All right. It's challenging to think about making evaluation an ongoing process, especially when we are often overworked, the only person for a lot of beds, and extending ourselves. But the one thing I want to remind you all is that evaluation is literally part of the TR process, and that includes program evaluation, not just evaluation of the individual. So how can I make evaluation ongoing? How am I going to fit this in? Jackie, what do you expect from me? All right. Use your schedule and set a regularly scheduled time to input data. Make it on your calendar for work. Set it in there. You know how many surveys you'll get in a month after your first couple months, and schedule that time. Maybe every week you enter a few surveys. Maybe you like to save it all for the end and take a little while longer, but whatever it is, set a regularly scheduled time to input that data. You want to start tracking in Excel or an equivalent where the worksheets can be duplicated. You really don't want to do this in Word with a table because Word will not do math for you. And over time, that will become a beast. So you really want to use an Excel or spreadsheet equivalent program. When you start, invest time in learning the appropriate formulas within Excel. Again, there are so many resources online of which formulas to use when, but really invest that time. It might feel super slow, like maybe, you just took a whole afternoon to figure out how to sum something or how to count if. But learning the correct formulas over time will make this so much easier for you. You can also just start to include surveys as part of the discharge process itself. So make it normal.
make it part of your regular discharge process. Maybe what strategy works for you is that when people get near discharge, that discharge time is coming up, maybe a week before they're supposed to be done, you hand out surveys. Maybe it's you go see them the day before discharge. Maybe it's their last scheduled group with you. You ask them to fill out their survey. But whatever it is, make it part of the process of discharge. So that way you're not um, thinking of a new way of doing this every time. It becomes part of your system. And then let this program evaluation guide you in your evaluation selection. So maybe you're seeing a lot of, high scores in patient satisfaction. So as you add in new metrics, should you keep tracking patient satisfaction, or excuse me, yes, you should keep tracking patient satisfaction. Should you keep adding more patient satisfaction measures? Well, no, you might have really gotten enough information there. Maybe it's time to really start looking at other measures. Maybe it's time to start looking at quality of care. Maybe it's time to start looking at value. So if you're seeing high satisfaction consistently, like let's add in some other things to get some more descriptors for what's happening with the program. Um, and maybe it's time to start tracking how much money you cost, and maybe it's time to start tracking what a great investment your program is. So keep adding little by little, but remember that once you start tracking a metric, you're making a commitment to that metric. So see how comfortable you get with Excel, see how much you can share the work of evaluation, and add to it bit by bit. All right, so these were the objectives of the session. So the first was that you would be able to identify a minimum of 2 ways to capture data from your program metrics. The second objective was to be able to identify a practical method to compile your data. And the last was to be able to identify a minimum of 2 ways to use data to advocate for TR services. I really hope that this has been a good opportunity for you to learn about program metrics and how you can use them as a continuous program evaluation to improve your services and your program offerings. I hope that the information has been useful, and I hope that you know that it's something that you have the power to do and that you can achieve. It has been a pleasure to make this PowerPoint, and like I said, I hope it has been useful to you. Thank you so much for viewing the session and learning about how to make programs that make differences. If you have any questions about the session, please know that you can email me. Here's my email again. It's jacqueline.dyke@cortland.edu if you ever have any questions. I hope you've really enjoyed this year's NYSTER conference, and I hope to see you all live next year.